And Liftoff, the rise of Starliner and a new era in human spaceflight.
The Atlas V RD-180 main engine and 2 solid rocket boosters ignite to generate more than 1.5 million pounds of thrust to lift the rocket away from the pad. Shortly after liftoff, Atlas begins a pitchover to attain the proper flight path while minimizing the dynamic pressure the vehicle experiences during flight. To ensure crew safety and comfort, the Atlas V rolls to a heads-up position and uses booster engine throttling to limit vehicle acceleration to 3.5 Gs. The Atlas V reaches Mach 1, the speed of sound, at 1 minute 5 seconds. The 2 SRBs are jettisoned at 2 minutes 20 seconds. At 4 minutes 29 seconds, propellant levels deplete and the booster engine shuts down. 6 seconds later, the Atlas Centaur separation system activates to release the booster stage. The vehicle now weighs less than 9% of what it did at liftoff. Jettison of the Ascent cover occurs at 4 minutes 41 seconds. The Ascent cover protects critical hardware on top of the spacecraft and provides an aerodynamic shape for ascent through the atmosphere. 4 seconds later, burn of the dual-engine Centaur begins. This burn guides the Centaur to an elliptical suborbital trajectory at an inclination of approximately 51.6 degrees. Approaching aeroskirt jettison, the Centaur is burning propellant at a rate of 100 pounds, or 45 kilograms per second, traveling at more than 10,520 miles, or 16,930 kilometers per hour, and located 78 miles, or 126 kilometers in altitude, and 333 miles, or 536 kilometers downrange. The ULA-designed aeroskirt extends the Starliner's surface, enhancing its aerodynamic characteristics and stability, and minimizing the loads of this unique crewed configuration. At approximately 5 minutes 5 seconds, the aeroskirt is jettisoned. Nearly 12 minutes into flight, cutoff of the Centaur main engines, or MECO-1, occurs. The mission now enters a suborbital coast phase in preparation for separation. Centaur's suborbital trajectory design enhances crew safety by providing a shallow orbit more favorable for an abort if required, and ensures the Centaur will naturally deorbit, impacting the ocean off the southwest coast of Australia. At 14 minutes and 50 seconds, Centaur releases the CST-100 Starliner on its second orbital flight test.
Up. It's almost like a boilerplate from the bottom, so the surface heats and that helps bubble up some of those showers and thunderstorms that we see so often here in Florida in the summertime. But as I mentioned, those clouds really help to limit that heating.
Go ahead.
So we saw a lot less shower and thunderstorm
CST-100
that we
pad
would otherwise
operations
see.
complete, ready to configure right room for launch.
Roger. Blue team lead, LC.
Go ahead.
Perform toxic vapor and O2 checks when raising environmental seal and configure white room for launch.
Roger.
L minus 50 minutes.
Is looking good as we head closer to T0. Guys?
All right, that's a great update, Brian. We'll check in with you a little bit later for that L-30 briefing by Will Ulrich to the launch team. There's a distant shot of a launch pad, Slick 41 as they call it. We are L-48 minutes and counting. Just a few miles away from us is our team of launch commentators at United Launch Alliance's Atlas Spaceflight Operations Center, or ASOC. They are listening in to the launch operations. We're talking about Dylan Rice, launch director himself for United Launch Alliance. In fact, recently oversaw the GOES-T launch. Well done. And Boeing's Lauren Seabrook, the newest member of Boeing's broadcast team. Welcome to you both.
Hey, thank you so much, Daryl. Dylan and I are coming to you from the heart of ULA's operations, where we are really just tucked in the middle of everything going on. We are surrounded on all sides by the men and women, the engineers who are prepping the rocket. And actually, if we take a look behind us, you can see us up here kind of above all the action that's happening down below, and you can see what's happening on the sides here as well, just to give you a better perspective on where we're able to listen to the flight loops. So Dylan, why don't you give us an update on how things are going with the rocket?
Well, Lauren, Atlas V and Centaur are fueled and ready to go. The vehicle was rolled out to the pad yesterday, where it was connected to the propellant storage farms, air conditioning, all the other pad utilities. Daryl talked about that just a minute ago. The countdown started this morning about 7:30. We powered up the rocket, began our final checks of all of our avionics systems, and then started final preparations out at Launch Complex 41. All that work wrapped up around noon, and with Complex 41 and the launch vehicle ready, we started cryogenic tanking just before 1 p.m. Cryogenic tanking takes under 2 hours to complete and went very, very smoothly today. For now, the vehicle remains in stable topping, and all of our pre-launch checks are basically complete. The team is active closing out the crew access tower as we speak. Once all that work is wrapped up, the team will clear the pad. This is the 93rd flight of the safe and reliable Atlas V launch vehicle, the second flight of the N22 configuration, the 103rd launch from Slick 41, and ULA's 150th launch overall. This vehicle is equipped with a dual-engine Centaur, a configuration that is uniquely capable of providing all the performance required for Starliner's mission.
So let's take a look at some video that we recorded just about an hour ago from our White Room. This is when our pad team was wrapping up pre-launch procedures. Like I said, it wrapped up about an hour ago, but some of the things you'll see on your screen have been happening throughout the afternoon. They've been doing things like making sure the switches inside the spacecraft were all in the proper position. They removed ground support equipment that was no longer needed for Starliner, and they've ensured that all the air ducts were not blocked. They also armed the launch abort system switch inside the spacecraft. That's actually something the crew will do in the future, but because, of course, we have no crew on board today, the pad team took care of that for us. They also checked to see if the gravity indicator was secure. I can tell you, I can confirm the gravity indicator is tethered to seat number 2. And before the hatch closure, they purged the cabin to make sure that the humidity was at the right level. Once the hatch was closed, they checked for leaks by pressurizing it, and they basically do this by pushing air into the cabin and holding that pressure for about 10 minutes. It's kind of like inflating a balloon. If you think about if you were, pushing air into the balloon and holding it, if there were any holes in that balloon, you would notice it would start to leak, and that would be very obvious. Well, the telemetry that feeds back to us can let us know if there are any leaks, and that way we know that we are safe to fly. And so once they checked the integrity of the hatch seal, they released that air, and then they normalized the pressure. And everything so far has gone really smoothly. The entire pad team is actually called the Blue Team. It's made up of 5 people from Boeing and 3 people from ULA. And Dylan, they really work together, but they have a lot of different responsibilities. What are some of the things the ULA pad team members do?
Well, the ULA team members are there to really manage the crew access tower system. So they're performing safety checks of the tower and configuring the White Room prior to the team leaving the pad. Part of that configuration of the White Room will be retracting the Starliner access plank and raising the White Room environmental seal for launch. Once all that work is done, the Blue Team will clear the pad and head for the fallback area for launch.
And we also watched a really special moment of the team coming together right at the end of finishing their closeout procedures. They were arm in arm, kind of had their heads bowed, had a final moment there with the spacecraft before they left. So it was a really special moment, and I'm sure it was special for them as well. So Daryl and Dee, we'll go back to you.
Thank you very much, Lauren. It'll be good to see that pad team helping the astronauts get aboard that spacecraft here soon. And now, after the Atlas V launches with Starliner aboard, there are several moments to look for. Take a look.
Ascent begins at T-0, liftoff, the end of the countdown and the beginning of the mission. Shortly afterwards, at T+12 seconds, the rocket rolls, lining up Starliner with its target orbit and putting the astronauts in a heads-up position. Then, around T+40 seconds, max Q starts. That's also known as max aerodynamic pressure. This is a critical time when the atmospheric forces reach their highest. Next, at about +1 minute 35 seconds, the two solid rocket boosters run out of fuel and burn out, and about a minute later they separate from the booster. The Atlas booster engine continues to burn for almost 2 more minutes. Then at approximately +430, booster engine cutoff, or BECO. About 5 seconds later, the booster separates, and so does the Ascent cover on top of Starliner. At around 4 minutes 45 seconds, the Centaur upper stage ignites, continuing the push to orbital speeds. Then a little after 5 minutes, Starliner is free of the atmosphere and doesn't need additional aerodynamic support, and the aeroskirt is jettisoned. After a long 6+ minute push from Centaur, main engine cutoff, or MECO, happens around 12 minutes after liftoff. Then, when Centaur successfully separates almost 15 minutes after launch, ULA's job is done. But Starliner is not quite in orbit yet. After a 16-minute coast, Starliner ignites 4 of its orbital maneuvering and attitude control, or OMAC engines, for the orbital insertion burn, and then 31 minutes after liftoff, the ascent profile is complete.
Controlling Starliner's flight to the International Space Station are the teams at Mission Control in Houston.
Let's check in with the launch commentators we will hear immediately after liftoff. NASA's Brandy Dean and Boeing's Josh Barrett are joining us from the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas.
Thanks so much, Daryl and Dee, and welcome to Mission Control Houston. Have a good evening. Josh and I have been listening in on the team's preparation.
LCFE.
Listening in and making sure everything is set for today's launch. They're led today.
We're just watching the TVMS system here. We're seeing the N204 spiking as they're opening the environmental seals, recommending that we temporarily inhibit it until it's complete, let it stable. I'm sorry, say again? The interior N204 sensor that's in the white room, as they're opening up the seal, the level of it is currently spiking. It's seeing that influx of outside air, recommending that we temporarily inhibit until they're finished with the move in the white room. Roger, you can go ahead and disable the CAT TVM system monitoring this time. Copy.
She'll be getting a lot of help from Starliner's automated flight software, and then hopefully some minimal help from the team here in this control room on the ground if all is going well. But the team has been commanding the vehicle since about L-3 hours, so just over 2 hours ago they've really taken command of the vehicle. Here in the control room behind us we've got console operators monitoring all their systems. Immediately behind us we've got our GNC and propulsion subsystem operators. The team really seems to be in good spirits. It's been a relatively clean countdown. And so far, it's been pretty quiet, and we're really looking forward to launch.
Yeah, everything looking good as we count down to today's 5:54 p.m.
Ace, this is Blue Team Lead on 15.
6:54 Eastern.
Arm control, I'm ready for the checklist.
You're on 1.
Space Station Flight Control Team watching over their systems and verifying that they're ready. We're going to toss it down there now to Gary Jordan, who's been watching over with them.
Hey, thank you, Brandy and Josh. Yes, I'm right down the hall here in Mission Control Houston. Behind me, the flight controllers are looking after the orbiting laboratory. That's the destination of the Boeing Starliner, the International Space Station. Teams here are led by Flight Director Anthony Varya. Right now, they're checking out the station systems to get ready for a go for launch and making sure that the station itself is ready to receive Starliner. We'll be watching today's launch closely in this room, but really we'll kick into gear tomorrow when we set up for joint operations with the teams down the hall where Brandy and Josh are controlling the Boeing Starliner. Shortly after launch and throughout tonight, Starliner will execute a series of burns to gradually raise its orbit and catch up with the orbiting lab. We'll also see a series of demonstrations to test Starliner systems and capabilities all along the way until docking, about 24 hours after launch. In the meantime, the Expedition 67 crew is in a sleep period, getting some rest before supporting a docking late at night Greenwich Mean Time tomorrow. But we did hear that the crew requested to watch the launch through the broadcast, so everybody say hi to the crew. From left to right, we have NASA astronaut Bob Hines, European Space Agency astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti. Of Roscosmos, we have Denis Matveyev, Oleg Artemyev, and Sergei Korsakov. And rounding out the crew with NASA astronauts Jessica Watkins and Kjell Lindgren. Lindgren and Hines will be monitoring Starliner's approach and docking tomorrow. After tomorrow's docking, the crew will open up the hatches the following day and formally welcome the Starliner to the station. So again, the International Space Station flight control teams are getting ready to give their go for launch. In the meantime, let's get back to the action with Dee and Megan over at the Kennedy Space Center.
Here to talk about the importance of this day is Kennedy Space Center
Yes,
Director.
sir. First step 300. Environmental seal has been raised and white room is configured for launch. Blue team is ready to clear pad.
Roger. Clear the blue team to the FHA roadblock. And blue team lead, based on the timeline here, I'm going to wave off securing the MRAPs on the way out. So please just proceed to the roadblock.
Roger. Clearing pad now.
Course, from here, it's going to be going
MLC.
with the International Space Station.
Awesome.
Then
Clear the flight hazard area. Turn area warning system light for complex 41 to flashing red, and sound the area warning horn. Roger.
certify that vehicle so that we will then be able to put our crew on it for another test flight, and then that'll lead to services with the Boeing Starliner where we can purchase them.
Right, so then once it's certified, then that means we have a second provider. How will that help NASA's commercial crew program grow?
So when we started out this program, you know, we always wanted to have more than one provider. So having a second provider that we can purchase a commercial service from to transport our astronauts to and from the International Space Station gives us a reliability, a redundancy that we really need and we really want within our commercial crew program. And that allows us to do even more research on the International Space Station, allow us to do the technology development that we're going to need as we continue our exploration mission further out into deep space, back to the moon, and then on to Mars.
So it sounds like a second provider is going to mean more launches from here on the Space Coast. You know, how has Kennedy Space Center been handling this ever-growing role as a multi-user spaceport?
So it's interesting. I found a pamphlet in my dad's belongings that showed that as early as the 1970s, Kennedy was
channel 1. What? Roger, just advise when you have the CAT system, the TVM system disabled.
Roger, CAT TVM system is disabled.
Roger.
A very, very busy spaceport, and we're very, very proud of it. We have over 250 agreements, close to 100, 250 partnerships and 100 separate agreements out here today. And another just interesting fact, one of the first assets or facilities that we didn't need after the space shuttle program that we entered a partnership in is the very one that the Starliner was being built in today. So C-3PF that the Starliner was manufactured and tested in today, that we're going to launch on this test flight, started more than 10 years ago with that used to be the Orbital Processing Facility, or OPF3 as we knew it. So.
Yeah, I love when things come full circle. Thank you so much, Janet.
You're welcome. Thank you, Megan.
Back to you guys.
All right, thank you, Megan and Janet. Great history there on the Boeing facility here at Kennedy. Time now to find out how the countdown to the launch of NASA and Boeing's Orbital Flight Test 2 is going. We're at L-34 minutes and counting. So let's get back to the Atlas Spaceflight Operations Center with Lauren and Dylan.
Daryl, from where I'm standing right here, I'm able to actually turn around and see NASA astronaut Sunny Williams, and she's on console working with her colleagues and following along with this countdown. Of course, she's here because we do not have any crew on board today. We are taking a rather heavy load of cargo up with us, about 800 pounds up to the ISS. Rosie the Rocketeer is back, as you heard Josh mention earlier. Of course, she sort of stole the show last time, but What's really amazing is we were able to gain so much information from the sensors that were on her last time that now we've moved those sensors to other parts of the spacecraft and to the other seats in the spacecraft. That way we have a better idea of how other passengers will ride on Starliner. Now, having her in the commander's seat also helps maintain the center of gravity during the mission. And you can see she's wearing the OFT-2 mission patch on the right side of her chest. And of course, the classic red bandana with white polka dots. Hers was actually autographed by one of the original Rosie the Riveters, May Cryer. She wrote to her, "To the moon and the stars." Our Rosie named that after that Rosie, of course, and they both embody inspiration, strength, hope, and determination. A famous World War II icon and Boeing factory worker who helped build planes at just 17 years old, Rosie the Riveter recruited scores of women to enter the workforce in record numbers. Today, Boeing continues its rich history of recruiting, supporting, and developing women. I can personally attest to that. And as of last year, women made up more than 24% of Boeing's workforce. Now, let's talk about some of the other cargo going up. They will also be taking NASA cargo.
Go ahead.
We've been discussing on 4 hydrazine bottle temp at the lower limit. We've got a concern about inadvertently triggering that during thermal. I'd like to talk with the anomaly team about our path forward with this.
Roger, please come in the anomaly team and provide a recommendation.
Book on.
Our teams are activating the service module propulsion system right now for launch, sort of like priming your engine, making sure things are ready to go for both nominal and abort situations. Dylan, how are things going with the rocket?
Well, things are going great with the rocket, Lauren. We remain in the final built-in hold as we continue to prepare for liftoff. There are a few activities still ahead of us today. The blue team is now clearing the tower and clearing the pad, and final preparations for launch are underway as we prepare the vehicle's propulsion and hydraulic systems for flight. The avionics team will be taking upper-level wind data and loading that into our flight computer that helps Atlas, Centaur, and Starliner kind of steer its way through the winds as we move through the atmosphere. Also, we'll hear very shortly comm checks between the Launch Control Center, Mission Control in Houston, the BMCC at Kennedy Space Center, and then for crewed missions, the astronauts will participate in that comm check as well. Once all that work is done, the crew access arm will be retracted, and then the team will start the final polling for launch.
And as you mentioned, there are a lot of things that our crews throughout both ULA and Boeing are doing today as sort of practice. They don't necessarily have to do it today, but it's a good time to practice for the next flight. So, Daryl and Dee, back over to you.
All right, we'll check back in with you both in just a little bit. Today is Boeing's third test of the Starliner capsule. In November of 2019, Boeing successfully completed a pad abort test, which demonstrated the spacecraft's ability to keep astronauts safe in the unlikely event of an emergency on the pad or during flight. A month later, Starliner launched on the first orbital flight test, or OFT. The spacecraft got into orbit and safely returned from space, but did not get into the proper orbit to rendezvous with the space station, and that leads us to today with OFT-2.
And Starliner's return to the launch pad comes after months of diligent testing and analysis work by the Boeing team. This became necessary when propulsion system valves did not open as designed during pre-launch system checks last year. Here's a closer look at our journey in preparation for today's flight.
Minus 30 minutes.
RC, conduct weather briefing on Channel 8 Weather Conference Net.
Roger.
LC, OSM.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Blue team is cleared BDA at this time.
Roger, thank you. Flight LC, Channel 1.
LC flight.
Proceed with SM prop system activation.
Roger.
Arm control LC.
Arm control.
Start arm hydraulic final prep.
Roger.
Box 1 LC.
Box 1 go.
Perform pogo suppressor charge.
Roger.
Prop 1 LC. Prop 1, go. Perform RD-180 transducer converter calibration. Roger. PNE-2, LC.
Go ahead.
Perform Centaur LH2 SPV cycle test.
Roger. L minus 29 minutes.
LC Prop 1.
Solve those problems as they come up. We carefully took a step back. We troubleshot the problem. And we got to an understanding of what the failure was. We put mitigation in place, and we've proven that that mitigation works. And we've tested the valve several times in this flight.
Go ahead, Prop 1.
RD-180 transducer converter calibration is complete.
Roger. Flight control, start flight control, final prep.
Roger. LC Prop 1.
Go ahead.
Engine FIV is closed.
Roger.
We really took our time to get it right, because ultimately our goal is to fly astronauts safely to and from the International Space Station, and safety is paramount.
People that are very passionate about the work that they do, they understand the importance of every little step that they take. And it contributes to making this vehicle the safest and of the highest quality.
It's huge, really, to have a second crew transportation system. We really want that. That's the goal of the commercial crew program.
Every decision that we make, we definitely have the astronauts' safety in mind.
It's not only the astronauts that are flying it, but it's the people working around the spacecraft. Our goal is to keep everyone safe.
Knowing, again, that our friends are going up there and are going to take this awesome ride to space and come back home, and we're going to be able to deliver them back to their families, safe and sound. It's pretty special. It really is.
I am very emotional about it, yes, because this has just been a passion of mine for a long time.
First launch.
LC PNE-2.
Go ahead.
Centaur LH2 SEV cycle test complete.
Roger.
The vehicle safely.
L minus
This
27
mission is all about everything that happens in between.
We're going to launch. It's going to go great. We're going to come back home, and then we're on to the next one.
Go Boeing. That is my last thought. It's 2 words. Just go Boeing.
Here's a live look inside the Boeing Mission Control Center, where the launch team is working and monitoring pre-launch operations along with NASA astronauts.
Yeah, that's right, Dee. There's 2 NASA astronauts on console with this launch team today. They are Commander Barry Butch Wilmore and Mission Specialist Mike Fink. And there they are. They're joining us live from a room immediately next door to the BMCC because we didn't want to pull them too far away from their consoles. Hey, guys, thank you both for taking the time. Butch and Mike, you guys were some of the last people to see and look inside that spacecraft today. Mike, we have a shot of you actually doing some work. Tell us a little bit about what you did and what you saw and how you're feeling.
Yes, Starliner looks
Flight
great.
control,
Myself and our other astronaut, Sonny Williams.
Go ahead. This flight control.
Roger. You have a status on RP1 temp update?
Oh, Roger. RP1 temperature update complete.
Roger. Prop 1, LC. Prop 1, go. Initiate fuel fill sequence.
Roger.
LC1 AC.
Go ahead.
I have a recommendation for you on that hydrazine bottle outlet temp.
Roger. LD.
LD.
Proceed, AC.
Okay. The present parameters are very conservative for this mission, so to avoid inadvertent tripping, we're going to recommend that on RLM we disable line item 601 and 324. Also, to establish a manual monitor by CLE of that parameter, new value is 60 degrees F, not to exceed, and down to T-minus 1 minute 26.
Copy. And that was line item 601324.
That's affirmative.
Roger. RLM LC? Or LC concurs. LD?
LD concurs.
Roger. RLM LC?
RLM, go ahead.
Roger. Please disable line items 601 and 324.
Roger, we'll go.
And Centaur lead LC?
Sealy on 1.
Roger. You're ready to manually monitor the hydrazine bottle temp down to a 60-degree minimum, down to T-minus 1 minute, 20 seconds?
Roger.
Roger. Thank you.
L minus 24 minutes.
LC display control.
Go ahead.
Step 70, L minus 3, primary steering file adjust underscore AV 082 underscore 06 with SDL CRC 96 Bravo Bravo has been received, verified, and is ready to load it to the Inca.
Proceed with load.
Roger.
L minus 23 minutes.
SYS LC.
SYS.
Switch all secondary decoms to RF link and verify lock.
Roger.
Also initiate orbital parameter calculations on primary CGLS.
Roger.
LC RLM on 1.
Go ahead.
Limits 601 and 324 have been disabled.
Roger.
L minus 22 minutes.
LC display control.
Go ahead.
Flight control final approach complete and Atlas hydraulics at standby pressure.
Roger.
LC locks 1.
Go ahead.
Pogo suppressor charge is complete.
Roger.
L minus 21 minutes.
LC arm control.
Go ahead.
Step 100 arm hydraulic final preps are complete.
Roger.
LC display control.
Go ahead.
Step 110, L minus 3, primary steering file adjust underscore AV 082 underscore 06 with SDL CRC 96 Bravo Bravo has been verified and loaded into the Inca.
Roger.
LC OSM.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. We verified that the blue team has cleared the FHA. All 8 personnel have been accounted for.
Roger. So I have FHA clear at this time?
Yes, sir, you do.
Roger.
L minus 20 minutes.
Eni 1 LC.
Eni 1.
Reinitiate AHB charging.
Roger.
RLM LC.
RLM, go ahead.
Verify redline monitor and event table are in the correct configuration for terminal count.
Verified.
RC LC.
RC.
Verify solar radiation acceptable for launch.
Verified.
LCSYS.
Go ahead.
Step 90, all secondary decoms verified on RF link.
Roger.
All communications switch to channel 1. All personnel and visitors remain in present position until launch. Maintain operational silence in the LCC. L-19 minutes.
This is the LC with terminal count briefing. If a condition exceeds a launch constraint anytime after the terminal count status check, the observer shall announce hold, hold, hold on channel 1, identify their station, and briefly state the reason for the hold.
Flight STC MSR Manager, this is Slick on Launch Ops. This time we'll conduct our CST-100 poll for terminal count. Report readiness to support terminal count when prompted. MSR Manager. MSR is ready. STC.
ECT is ready.
Flight. Flight is go. CST-100 is proceeding with final configuration for launch. All operators monitor LCCs and report any LCC violations to your operations leads.
Go ahead, this flight
SMD, Slick,
Perform launch on
Ops.
time verification.
Roger.
SMD. CST-100 is ready for terminal count. The management poll for launch will be conducted on ULA Channel 3 at L-8 minutes.
SMD copies. L-17 minutes.
OSM LC.
OSM.
Place SRB ignition SNA switch in the enable position.
SRB ignition enabled.
And verify the FTO, RCO, and OSM hold fire switches are in the proceed position.
Ready to proceed.
LC, the flight control.
Go ahead.
Launch on time verified.
Roger.
LC, P1.
Go ahead.
AHP charging reestablished and at flight mass.
Roger.
L-16 minutes. L-15 minutes.
LC flight, channel 1. Channel 1 and air to ground are now merged. Going to air to ground 1.
Roger.
LC flight, com check, air to ground 1.
Loud and clear on channel 1.
I have you the same.
LC prop 1.
Go ahead.
Fuel fill sequence is complete.
Roger.
Do their best, but there's always things that happen that you don't expect. And so really that's what the crew is looking for. They're looking for what worked, what we need to continue to work on. That is actually the meaning of a test flight. So it's, as a tester, it's actually a great moment to see it come together.
Yeah, to get that opportunity.
Yes.
Perfect. Janet, thank you so much. Oh, Pam, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Back to you guys.
All right, thank you very much. And we are L minus 12 and a half minutes and counting until liftoff. And you can see behind us the rockets on the pad. Atlas V Starliner is ready to go. We just heard that the launch team saying it's a great day, a beautiful day to go fly Starliner.
We are anticipating it.
It is a lot of anticipation out here for this one. And ULA and Boeing are finishing up their preparations for launch. And so we want to give you one other note. Once Starliner launches, the ISS, its destination, will be flying 257 statute miles over the North Atlantic.
Now let's head to the Atlas Space Flight Operations Center, where Lauren and Dylan will tell us what those teams are doing, and then they will count us down to liftoff.
Hey, Dee, Starliner is just about ready to switch over to internal power, so we're waiting for that. And then
Arm
also
control,
we are
LT.
going to start seeing
Arm control.
that crew.
Stow the crew access arm for launch.
Roger.
We will see it move quite slowly today, but Dylan, if it needed to.
L minus 11 minutes. L minus 10 minutes.
Flight, verify CST 100 on internal power.
Verified.
Seconds now away from the mission management poll that I spoke about earlier. And that will lead up to the terminal count status check.
Flight, verify ordnance configured for launch.
Verified.
And Starliner's ordnance is configured for launch now. That basically means that the devices that initiate our separation events are ready to support both nominal and contingency operations that happen or could happen during the ascent profile.
L minus 8 minutes.
We are 8 minutes to launch.
All right, and we did hear on one of the other loops that mission management...
LC arm control.
Go ahead.
First step 260. Crew access arm stowed for launch.
Roger.
And that call indicating that the crew access arm is now stowed and latched for
LC
launch.
switch to ready position.
For launch.
Roger. LC switch to ready position. All steps are complete prior to the status check.
L minus 7 minutes.
Status check to proceed with terminal count. Out.
Go.
Water.
Go.
Sensor. Hydraulic.
Go.
Pneumatic.
Go.
LO2.
Go.
Water.
Go.
Sensor systems. Propulsion.
Go.
Pneumatic.
Go.
LO2.
Go.
LH2.
Go.
Has gas.
Go.
Electrical systems. Airborne.
Go.
Ground.
Go.
Facility.
Go.
RFFTS.
Go.
Flight control.
Go.
GCQ.
Go.
Op support.
Go.
COM.
Go.
Umbilicals.
Go.
Arm control.
Go.
ECS.
Go.
Redline monitor.
Go.
Quality.
Go.
Op safety manager.
Go.
ULA safety officer.
Go.
Vehicle system engineer.
Go.
Anomaly chief.
Go.
Range coordinator.
Clear to proceed.
Flight director.
Houston flight is go.
Launch director.
You have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count. ALC, verify T0 is set for 22:54:47 Zulu.
Verified. L minus 6 minutes. L minus 5 minutes and 30 seconds. L minus 5 minutes.
LC flight. Starliner configured for terminal count.
Roger.
L minus 4 minutes and 45 seconds.
All steps are complete prior to terminal count.
L minus 4 minutes and 30 seconds. On my mark, the time will be T minus 4 minutes and counting. 3, 2, 1, mark. 3:55.
Ground pyros enabled.
.330.
Atlas hydraulics at flight pressure.
.3 minutes.
Securing LO2 topping.
Pressurizing Atlas tanks.
250.
FTS internal.
$159.
Vehicle internal.
$155.
Launch sequencer start.
$150.
Securing Centaur LH2.
Securing Centaur LO2.
$140.
Launch enabled.
$137.
FTS armed.
$120.
OCU's armed.
SCS count started. EDS Ascent.
One minute.
Rock, report range status.
Range green.
54.
PLP started.
$40.
Atlas at flight press.
$30.
Centaur at flight press.
25.
Status check.
Go Atlas. Go Centaur.
Go Starliner. Release.
SRB chamber pressure looks good. PU has gone to closed loop control. Pitchover is complete. The RD-180 is now throttling down to maintain acceptable dynamic pressure limits on the vehicle. All systems continue to look good. Vehicle is now passing through max Q, maximum dynamic pressure. Atlas is now 4 miles in altitude, 1 mile downrange distance. All systems continue to look good. Mach 1, Atlas is now supersonic. The RD-180 is now beginning to throttle up. Engine response looks good. Vehicle attitude rates are well controlled. Angular rates are near zero. We've had SRB burnout, and the RD-180 has throttled back up to full thrust. Engine response looks good. Atlas is now 16 miles in altitude, 10.5 miles downrange distance. Booster systems continue to look good at this time. Atlas V weighs now just 1/2 of what it did at launch, burning propellant at a rate of 2,800 pounds per second. Standing by for SRB jettison. And we've had indication of good SRB jettison. Vehicle is now executing closed-loop steering. We have approximately 2 minutes remaining in the Atlas booster phase of flight. The RD-180 is now throttling down slightly as expected. Engine response looks good. Centaur reaction control system is now pressurizing to flight levels. Atlas systems continue to look good at this time. Vehicle is 38 miles in altitude, 79 miles downrange distance. Now at T plus 209 seconds, we have 1 minute to BECO, 1 minute to booster engine cutoff. The RD-180 is now throttling to maintain a constant 3.5 G acceleration limit. The RL-10 engines have now begun their boost phase chill down sequence. Last few seconds of booster flight. We have BECO, booster engine cutoff. And we have indication of a successful stage separation event. Pre-start on the RL-10s. And we have ignition. Vehicle has executed closed-loop guidance. And we have indication of aeroskirt jettison. This first and only burn of the Centaur upper stage engines will last just over 7 minutes and will place the Centaur and Starliner in a suborbital trajectory. Upper stage systems continue to look good at this time. The engine propellant utilization system has gone to closed loop control. Engine response remains nominal. We just received word that booster performance was above nominal. Looks like we had a very good booster flight. At this time, we're seeing the propellant utilization system on the upper stage, driving the mass error in the propellant tanks to near zero. PU system operation looks good. We are now just under 7 minutes into flight. 5 minutes remain in this burn of the upper stage engines. The RL-10 engines continue to look good. Chamber pressures continue to look right down the middle of the expected band. We're seeing minimal activity on the RCS system as expected. The RCS firings are driving loop temperatures to near bottle temperatures as expected. We're now at T plus 9 minutes. Correction, T plus 8 minutes. At this time, the Centaur is at an altitude of 102 miles, downrange distance of 1,075 miles. Powered autopilot is performing well. Vehicle attitude rates are near zero. We are now just under 10 minutes into flight. We have 2 minutes remaining until MECO 1. Both RL-10 engines continue to perform as expected. Upper stage systems are stable. The PU system on both engines continues to operate as expected, driving mass error to near zero. One minute until MECO 1. PU system has gone open loop in preparation for RL-10 cutoff. And we have MECO 1. Both RL-10 engines have shut down. At this time, the Centaur has entered a coast phase. Separation of Starliner will occur in approximately 3 minutes. Vehicle is now turning to its separation attitude. Upper stage systems are operating as expected during this coast phase. Just about 2 minutes remaining until Starliner separation. Vehicle attitude has settled at the separation attitude. One minute until Starliner separation. Thirty seconds till separation. Ten seconds till separation. And we have Starliner separation. At this time, the Centaur and the Starliner will coast separately for a short time prior to their next activities. The Centaur will begin its preparations for re-entry into the Earth atmosphere, and the Starliner will proceed to its orbital insertion burn.
Mark in today's orbit. We're now just under 16 minutes into today's flight, so still about 15 minutes to go for that.
So there's a number of things that flight controllers are working on right now. They're transitioning Starliner from its launch mode over to its orbit mode. That includes powering up things like antennas, heaters, and those radiators that I mentioned earlier. We have good targeting for orbital insertion, a good forward command link, and a good MET epoch timer. Starliner making its way over the North Atlantic. Some other things going on right now. They are powering down some what's called demonstration flight instrumentation. We have some extra sensors on there for these demonstration flights. We have more of them on during a power descent, but we don't need some of those right now, so flight controllers are powering some of those down. Other things that are powering on include those propulsion line heaters. When in the vacuum of space and in the Earth's shadow, it gets quite cold, around negative 250 degrees, so we want to make sure those propulsion lines don't freeze. And the radiators are those little small silver discs you might be able to see on the side of the service module. If you remember your high school physics, the only way you can get rid of heat in a vacuum is through radiation. And so that sublimator will be powering down, and the radiators will be taking care of the heat management for the rest of the flight until we get ready to come home. Some things that you also might be seeing on your screen are some RCS jet activations. Those are just helping the target for that orbital insertion burn.
During this time. The Centaur is now in its re-entry attitude. Continue this coast for several more minutes. We're now at T plus 20 minutes. The Centaur continues this unpowered coast phase. We have about 11 minutes until we receive word on the spacecraft orbital insertion burn.
Absolutely. Well, just a few months ago, we were talking about how much confidence you have in the Atlas V rocket. And what made you say that?
Yeah, you know, we've been here a couple times watching launches, of course, not only for Starliner, for OFT the first time around, but also for other payloads that have gone up on the Atlas V. And, you know, they're pretty expensive. I told my mom at one point in time, if they're putting that expensive payload on top of that rocket, I feel pretty good about that. And I know the team, I've been here, talked to a lot of people who have worked on this, you know, this rocket, both here, Decatur, for example, as well in Denver. And I understand the engineering.
We're now at T plus 25 minutes into flight.
Engineering that
Centaur
goes into
upper
this
stage
complex machine.
systems continue
and,
to operate as expected.
A plus, you know, people
6 minutes approximately until orbital insertion burn completion.
Launch humans into space.
Well, we are waiting for that orbital insertion burn. It is a very important milestone for Starliner. What are you watching for here?
Yeah, we just want to make sure that, you know, that burn goes off without a flaw. We get circularized around the planet, and then we can all take a deep breath and let the spacecraft fly for a little bit and get ready for the rendezvous profile for the ISS. So I think that is really what we're waiting for, just to make sure it's going to happen correctly, which, you know, all indications are great. The spacecraft is working well.
Now, Sunny, I see you at the office quite often. I see the guys at the office quite often. You guys really have worked closely with the people who have their hands on this spacecraft day in and day out. What does that relationship mean to you?
It's huge. Like I mentioned, during the days leading up to this, I really was just thinking about the teams, all of the hard work that they've gone, you know, into getting the spacecraft ready to go, as well as getting this rocket ready to go. I know ULA has done a lot of work leading up to this after the last attempt, and this relationship is so key. I feel like I just want to stay committed to them to make sure that we get to the finish line with getting people to the International Space Station.
And so as soon as you guys finish up here tonight, then what happens? Where are you going next?
Oh, heading back to Houston. You know, Mission Control in Houston right now has the spacecraft, and we want to watch the rendezvous profile. You know, we're also, all three of us are sort of sitting in the shoes of, or in the seat of Rosie, you know, wondering what it's going to be like and what the spacecraft is going to see, how it's going to act in all of that rendezvous profile. So we'll be right there following along. So it's going to be an exciting 24 hours. I'm racing back. I'll be home tonight to be able to be in Mission Control in some capacity watching, just like here, watching that rendezvous profile.
And can you tell us much about what would happen between now and crewed flight? What kind of training do you have to go through, and what kind of things are we going to be working on with Starliner?
Right. So this mission is going to prove, you know, we're going to learn stuff. Not everything is going to go 100% correct, right? We learn stuff every time we take something to space. And so we're going to take those lessons learned from this mission and apply it to the next launch, which is the crewed flight test. But even beside for that, we have testing that we're ready to go do. We have the crew validation test, which is coming up this summer, where the three of us will be in the spacecraft, you know, in the suits, in the seats, checking out the environmental control system, checking out the ergonomics, making sure we fit, we're ready to go. We also be working with the software folks, so looking at all the displays, making sure that all the displays tell us the right information and we understand it correctly, and we can work with Mission Control with that. So there's a lot. And then, of course, there's training with the control team. The control team, we've had some training with them, but, you know, leading up to this, they've been working on an uncrewed version, and now, you know, us little pains in the neck are going to be sitting in there talking back to them. So we're going to work through all that choreography of how we're going to work together in the spacecraft.
Well, Sunny, your time is valuable. I really appreciate you joining us here. I know you need to get back down to the console
evacuating the tanks for propellant before reentry.
So thank you for being here, and we are going to continue to follow along the loops here at the ASOC and wait for that orbital insertion burn, which is basically when Starliner will be up in orbit, hanging out until we're ready to start the rendezvous process and docking tomorrow. So for now, that's it for me and Sunny, and as well as Dylan Rice here in Florida, and we'll get you back over to Brandy and Josh in Houston.
Thanks so much, Lauren. And great to hear from Sunny. We're now just about 2 minutes away from the orbital insertion burn. That, again, is going to be a 45-second burn. It's going to raise the perigee or the low point of Starliner's orbit out of the Earth's atmosphere and get it into a stable orbit. And after that, we'll begin checking out the critical control systems before tomorrow's docking.
minute and a half until the orbital insertion burn. Starliner is in the burn attitude. You might have seen earlier the nose of Starliner might have been pointed down towards the Earth, but that's actually the attitude that it needs to be, because as it orbits around the Earth, it will no longer be pointing at Earth. It will be pointing at that specific point in space that the orbital insertion burn will send us to. And once again, there'll be a lot of thruster activity. We want those 4 aft-facing OMAC engines, that's about 1,200 pounds of thrust each, to be pushing in exactly the right direction.
OMAC standing for Orbital Maneuvering and Attitude Control. They're going to fire for 45 seconds for this burn, changing Starliner's velocity by 85 meters per second, or 190 miles per hour. 30 seconds to go now until that burn ignites. Orbital insertion burn starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, this burn is going to last for 45 seconds. Teams here on the ground reporting 4 good orbital maneuvering and attitude control thrusters.
Now the colors you're seeing on those jets, or you were seeing on those jets, they indicate which integrated propulsion controller those jets are mapped to. We have 3 IPCs, integrated propulsion controllers. OI cutoff in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we have OI cutoff. And we have confirmation from Flight Director Mike Lammers. We have a good orbital insertion burn. Starliner is in a stable circular orbit on its way to the International Space Station. Now, this was a big hurdle to get through early on. We have a few demos to go on our way to the ISS. And then after that, hopefully a very good docking. But so far today, good launch, great performance from ULA. Atlas even gave us a little bit more of a push than we needed, but Centaur was able to adjust accordingly, place Starliner exactly where we needed it. And we have confirmation of a good OI burn. Once again, Starliner is in orbit, heading to the ISS.
It's a major milestone to get behind us, but it is really just the beginning. We've got a number of demonstrations now that Starliner will have to go through ahead of its International Space Station arrival. Those are going to start pretty much right away with a checkout of the VESTA systems. VESTA stands for Vision-Based Electro-Optical Sensory Tracking Assembly. They're basically sensors that take measurements that Starliner uses for relative navigation. Starliner has 2 of them, and each contains 4 sensors: a camera with a narrow view, a camera with a wide view, an infrared camera, and a LiDAR unit that uses laser to detect range.
Just a couple more things they're working through on their orbital insertion checklist. We have confirmation good radiator activation. So those radiators are now in control and controlling the thermal environment inside the cabin. And going back a little bit, just to help you guys learn a little bit about Starliner, going back to those IPCs, that blue, green, and red is what propulsion controller each of those thrusters are mapped to. So if you think of the flight controllers like the brain of Starliner, the IPCs are kind of like the nervous system, translating kind of those commands into movement. So we'll see the team continue to exercise those throughout the flight. Next up are a couple demos, but I think for now, we'll wrap up here in Houston.
That's right. With that last milestone safely behind us, we're going to say goodbye for the night. The Starliner team here in Mission Control will be monitoring continually as Starliner makes its way towards the International Space Station. Right now, Starliner is about 118 miles above the coast of Africa, heading towards the Indian Ocean. And with that, since the next destination for Starliner is going to be the International Space Station, we're going to get an update from Gary Jordan down the hall in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. But that is it for Josh and I for the night. That was a great launch, and we are excited to see Starliner on its way. Gary?
Hey, thanks, Brandy and Josh. It is so great to see Starliner in a good orbit and heading for the International Space Station. Teams here in the Space Station Flight Control Room will be monitoring Starliner's approach over the next 24 hours to dock with the orbiting lab. In that time, it will perform activation and checkouts of various systems, a few early demonstrations of its thrusters, guidance, navigation, and control equipment, as well as its communication systems as it executes a series of burns to gradually raise its altitude and get closer to the station. Tomorrow, be sure to tune in for our coverage of the approach and docking phase. When we get inside the approach ellipsoid, or about a 2-kilometer marker from the station, we'll see a few critical demonstrations of the Starliner to verify some of the spacecraft's capabilities to keep astronauts safe. We'll see station astronauts command a hold of the Starliner, and we'll see the Starliner perform a retreat maneuver in the approach corridor. After today's successful launch, we're targeting to start our coverage of Starliner's approach to the station at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for a docking scheduled for 7:10 p.m. The International Space Station crew is expected to host a welcome ceremony of the spacecraft to the station the following day, and we may get some peeks inside the Starliner. It'll be a busy week here in Houston during that docked phase of Starliner, and there's a lot to do. In the meantime, that'll do it for us here in Mission Control Houston. And with that, I'll send it back to Daryl and Dee over at the Kennedy Space Center.
Thanks, Gary. I'd like to thank the launch and flight teams across the country for making this day possible. But as you've heard many times, we know this is the first of many critical milestones for this test flight. Once docked, the Starliner will undergo a number of checkouts, including battery charging, transferring files through the space station downlink, hatch open and close, and cargo transfer. And of course, all of these demonstrations will provide the data needed to bring Boeing closer to having the privilege of carrying astronauts to and from the space station.
And NASA astronauts are certainly looking forward to that. The docking that you mentioned, scheduled for a little bit less than 24 hours from now at 7:10 p.m. Eastern Time. And while we're talking schedules, make sure you stay tuned for a post-launch news conference at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on our website, nasa.gov/live. And NASA, Boeing, and ULA leadership will be on hand to answer questions about the OFT-2 test flight up until this point in time. Until then, and then afterwards, you can find updates at nasa.gov/commercial crew, all one word. And then, of course, you can follow us on Twitter, as you can see there on the right-hand side, at commercial_crew.
We leave you now with another look at the launch of Orbital Flight Test number 2.
But before we do that, I got to compliment that jacket.
Oh.
That's a nice jacket.
That's right.
Yeah, it's looking good. Keep your eye on it.
Yes.
Somebody might burgle it from you if you're not looking. For Dee Russell, Boeing, ULA, and all of us here at the NASA Kennedy and Johnson Space Centers, I'm Daryl Nail. Have a good night, and remember to keep looking up.
Two minutes.
1:59.
Vehicle internal.
155.
Launch sequencer start.
150.
Securing Centaur LH2.
Securing Centaur LO2.